Will Tucker Carlson run for president in 2028? This is actually something that I first thought about probably last year around the time that he was dismissed from Fox News. Um, as some people may forget, he hosted a show on Fox for 7 years before, shortly after interviewing Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tucker was abruptly and with no direct reason given taken off the air by Fox or fired by Fox to the celebration of some people on the left wing. And he's since been hosting a show on Twitter. He has interviewed Trump since. He's actually the only Western journalist that has interviewed Putin since the Russia Ukraine conflict began. So that's another accolade of his. But I I can't say definitively if he would run. I can't say definitively if anybody will run. I can just say I think this person will. I think this person won't. But that's not the point of this video. It's to kind of like diagnose what the reasons would be for him wanting to run or for believing he does or doesn't, and then what his chances are. So, ego is one of the biggest reasons anybody wants to become president. But as far as I can tell, Tucker's never really directly acknowledged it. It's just been kind of something where you've been this anchor, you've been one of the leading voices of the, I guess, newer conservative movement. Like at this point, I hear more people talk about Tucker than Shapiro or really any other contemporary right wing commentator, which is crazy because when I was a kid, the big right wing guy that I would just keep hearing over and over about was Bill O'Reilly because of his show on Fox. So he's been totally eclipsed by another Fox pundit. But yeah, I couldn't say definitively if he would or not. I lean towards him doing it. There's the chance that he won't. But if we get to his actual chances of winning the nomination for the Republicans anyway, they are extremely high because he has one thing that 99% of potential candidates and hell 99% of politicians in America do not have, which is an actual legitimate fan base. There are people who watch Tucker every day, every week, who followed him from Fox to being on Twitter, I guess just being online in general. And that is something that would work to his benefit. He has higher name recognition than almost anyone else who could conceivably run as a Republican in 4 years. The only person who could come close to having the same level of, I guess, familiarity with voters, I'd say, if it's not like one of the someone who's already run for president before, like Cruz, then I'd say probably just Vance, who I and people can get mad at me for saying this. I don't believe Vance has an actual fan base. I think that he's a guy who wrote a book that some people say is good, whatever, and used that as part of his ability to get a Senate seat. Um, Most of the liking of him are just people who are pro-Trump. Like he's kind of just Trump's sidekick at this point. There's not really a coherent fan base for him that's independent on its own, whereas there is one for Tucker. So I don't think Vance would really be able to defeat Tucker. And really, the only scandals that Tucker could probably run into as a potential candidate, because the lack of experience thing doesn't matter anymore. Trump already broke that barrier down 1,000 times over. There might be something having to do with that Dominion voting system lawsuit, the one where Fox had to acknowledge that the commentators didn't know what they were talking about, or rather did know what they were talking about, were making false statements on air. That might be something, but I mean, again, people say Trump is a liar, so it's kind of like a prerequisite that they'll also say that Tucker is a liar. It's just that the same attacks will be used regardless of who's running or who isn't. But that would be the only thing that I think would really get him, and he's very effective. And because you look at the format of his show, he'll take some issue and have just kind of a segment on it. So theoretically, if he's doing campaign rallies, this could be a very similar format of You bring up whoever your main competitor is or an issue, and you just either have some pundit or supporter of yours or other person who is knowledgeable of the issue sit there and talk about it. And that would be so interesting to just see a campaign style where it's not just, oh, here's me and my surrogates. Here's me and this person that lives in Ohio, and they can tell you how JD Vance has failed to uh, adhere to the interest of the people that live in his state. If he does his rallies in that format, I think he has a very excellent. Just like even if, like, presuming that Trump wins in November and Vance becomes vice president, which at this point I lean toward Harris winning. Again, I don't claim to be some expert on what's going to happen or hold a crystal ball. I just think, as things currently stand, it looks like Harris will win. But assuming Trump gets elected and Vance is vice president and is trying to then run for president in 2028 against Tucker, even if Vance has Trump's endorsement, I don't think it helps him that much, because one thing that Trump people don't like to admit is that Trump is good at least getting himself elected, or, you know, having his devout group of supporters, but that doesn't translate to votes in primaries. This is why during the 2022 midterm, a lot of his candidates, like that Dr. Oz guy out of I believe it was Pennsylvania, lost despite having Trump's endorsement. And this led many Republicans to say, yeah, Trump's influence is not as strong as he thinks it is, or not as strong as we thought it was. And because of that, I just couldn't see where an endorsement, even if in this scenario Trump is the state, because Trump will have influence on the Republicans for as long as he lives, and I think he'll, still be around and healthy enough to just campaign and do stuff like that in 4 years. But I don't think his endorsement would help Vance against Tucker. In fact, I'd actually say if this ticket loses, so if Harris becomes the president, this year, and then Republicans are having an open primary, which they'll have anyway, but still in 2028. If Trump is not able to win a non-consecutive second term, I think there's a higher likelihood that he would endorse Tucker over Vance, or at least remain neutral in the primary until it's over, and then endorse one or the other. But either way, I don't think Vance has a snowball's chance in hell of beating Tucker. I don't think any of the Republicans. I'm not going to say Katie Britt. I wanted to say that, but I don't think any of them really could probably match up to. And I guess maybe I shouldn't speak in such a just convinced manner, because you go back to 2006, 2005. Did anybody think that first term Senator Obama would be able to beat Hillary? So stranger things have happened. I think his higher name recognition and the fact that he has a fan base will play into his ability to win the primary. Now, if you're going to a general election, his chances of winning that really depend on who the Democrat is. The ability to assess Harris as a electable candidate is going to come, like, people bring up her losing the primary, whatever. That's not telling me what I need to know. If Tucker is able to go to swing states and do the whole "I'm one of you guys, I believe in working people" and whatever, I think he has a chance of win. Really, any Republican has a chance of winning a general election against just generic Democrats. But I do believe there are certain ones where I really can't tell, and it still just comes down to his biggest strength will be that he's not a politician, which is something that people have been in the mood for historically in the United States with these presidential candidates. You look at whether it's Trump or Bush. When I say Bush, I'm talking about 43, or even going back even further, Carter. There is a consistency of the outsider politician, someone who's not part of the system. And Tucker, as a pundit, will be able to, maybe not as successfully enough to win the general, but at least as someone who's in a primary, go, yeah, I'm not an elected official. You can't blame me for Congress, not, for example, passing an immigration bill or just any issue that people may have with their government. You can't lay it at his foot because he's not in Congress. He has no control over any of the votes. He's someone who's just like you. He's irritated and frustrated by those politicians that just won't solve things. But he's somebody that's going to be really interesting to watch over the next couple of years because if think about this, if he doesn't run, he gets to keep doing his Twitter show, which is already getting attention, and he's on YouTube as well. And if he decides to run, if he wins the primary and general election, then he becomes either the 47th or 48th president, depending on who wins this time around. But if he loses, as a presidential candidate, whether it's the primary or general, he's still, he gets to boost his name recognition, which means more people are likely to go and watch his stuff on Twitter or on YouTube. Really, there's one of the reasons I think I lean towards him doing it is that there's really nothing to lose by doing it. Like if he wins, he gets ultimate power. If he loses, he gets more views on his. It's good. It's a good advertisement. It kind of reminds me of people were saying that Trump was only running in 2016 to boost his name recognition or just for the sake of getting attention for himself. Tucker could, be levied to the same allegation, but even if he doesn't win, it would still be a net positive for him. And it's been real fun just watching all the politicians just. I'll always give Tucker credit for one thing, besides the built-in audience. He is charismatic. He is likable. And again, that is not something I can say for most politicians. When he speaks, he can prosecute a point. He can address a societal ill. Like his position on Israel has really surprised me in just how non bootlicking of Netanyahu it is, which is something that almost all the Republicans and that's another factor, because I was saying I don't think he would lose in a primary. If he did lose, if there was anything that could get Tucker to not win that primary, it would have to be AIPAC giving loads and loads of money to, Katie Britt and all the rest of the other people that are pro-Israel that very likely will run in 4 years. We could throw Vance in there too, but giving it to all of his competitors and they just smear him as this despising of Jewish people person, which, I've never believed Tucker to be that. And we've established before that this is the go-to line for anyone that criticizes the Israeli government. But that would be the only thing that would convince me that he might not win the primary. And even with that, I think there's a lot of people in both parties that are just getting sick of giving all this money to these foreign governments. And the fact that, they're waking up to and having the realization that the U.S. government is more, or at least the U.S. politicians in general are more loyal to a foreign government than their own. So he still might not be smeared to the point of having to drop out or losing a bunch of support. But if there's one thing they would like the other Republicans in that race could unite against him on, it would be Israel, and that's really sad. Because it's one of the few positions he has that sets him apart drastically from the rest of those. I don't want to use a term that's offensive. The rest of those AIPAC accepting political figures. Yeah, there's really in my mind no one that has the uniqueness of what he would bring to that primary. And the only person I think could try to mount a challenge against him would be Vance. And Vance's ability to challenge him drops considerably if Trump loses this election. If Trump loses this election and Vance is not the incumbent vice president in 2028, Carlson can go, hey, look, you were part of a ticket that didn't win. I respect that you tried with Trump, but you didn't make it. I'm going to lead the party into the future. And man, it would be real fun watching the Tucker Vance debates. But yeah, he's got nothing to lose from doing it. He would be a very unique candidate. Um, he's one of the less likely ones because it's just speculation at this point. He hasn't really made any definitive statements as far as I can tell. But I do believe that if he were someone who decided to run, he could do very well. Of any of the people who could run in 2028 that have a realistic shot of winning, he'd be in the top five. Whether we're counting the Republican or Democratic side, that the nomination is his if he wants it. But the real question comes down to, does he want it? So that's just my position, and it'll be real fun to see if Tucker runs or not. This will be a nice prediction.